Okay, so here we go again. Day 2 of the bureaucracy. We're done after this. And the power of the bureaucracy really lays in this. It's about money, right? It's about money and discretionary authority and oversight. If you understand these portions of it, then you'll get what the bureaucracy can do. Now, we talked about the bureaucracy before. I got to stop, Abba. We talked about bureaucracy before because they carry out the laws for the president. Way back in Unit 1, we talked about this. The different parts that are involved in the government: executive enforces, legislative makes, judicial interprets, bureaucracy carries it out. So today, objectives: explain the importance of the name game and how it's associated with the bureaucracy. You've got a clip from the West Wing you're going to watch for me. We're going to talk about Munn Illinois. We're going to do a little bit of notes. And then we're going to talk about discretionary authority in a chart. We'll do a little bit of oversight again, going back to Congress. So, real quick question, building on yesterday's: why was the Constitution so vague about the role of the bureaucracy in the government? Because they had no idea what was going to happen, and they had no idea how big the government was going to get. If they listed what the bureaucracy could do, that's all they could do. By making it vague, by talking about departments and heads and how they get their jobs, by making it vague, the bureaucracy could grow. When FDR came to office at the beginning of his term in 1932, there was 50,000 people working for the national government. When he left, there was 500,000 people. When Carter came to office, there was 3 million people working for the federal government. So it expanded rapidly. We did this yesterday, but think about it. Now, to see what goes on with the bureaucracy, how often they had to meet, you can watch a quick portion. The link is right here on Netflix of the West Wing. You only have to watch about 14 minutes. They talk about how often they meet with the bureaucracy. There's some questions right here. What were they talking about until in the morning? How long have they met? When did they meet? What was the relationship between the president and the vice president? What's a rider to a bill? Be nice to go over that again. How do you know how the House members put the riders in the bill for the president? What did Toby and Josh suggest they do? And then finally, why would this be considered a veto threat? Talking about last time. So a little bit about the cabinet, a little bit about bureaucracy, a little bit about reviewing the executive's powers. 14 minutes, Netflix. If you can't watch it, that's cool. But it's a little help on understanding what the role is between the president and the bureaucracy. So let's start the name game here. Departments reserved for agencies of cabinet rank. So if you're a department, you have a cabinet level position. Now, all of these positions, with the exception down here of White House staff, all of these positions are appointed by the president and approved by the Senate. Okay, so the Senate approves all of these. Now, they manage specific policy areas. There's the formalized rules and specific jobs or tasks. Each one of the cabinet level positions has their own budget and staff. So if you guys look here on this chart at the bottom, over here, White House staff, they have no discretionary authority. They can only do what the president allows them to do, but they have a lot of power because of that rule of propinquity again. If you're in the room, you've got power. If you're not in the room, you don't have power. So over here, independent regulatory agencies, they have the most discretionary authority because they have set terms of office. In other words, they cannot be fired by the president. They're appointed for either 3, 5, or 7 years. And if a president appoints them, they serve for 7 years. Now, the president can ask for them to resign, but that doesn't mean anything, right? They don't have to do it. Cabinet, they can be fired. Executive office, they can be fired. They have no independent budget. White House staff can be fired. They have no discretionary authority. So over on the left of this chart, they have the least amount of discretionary authority, but they have the highest amount of influence on the president. The further away you get to the right, they have absolute discretionary authority because they can't be fired. Okay, so we'll get to independent regulatory agencies. Cabinet level positions, they have their own budget, they have their own staff, they have quite a bit of discretionary authority. Now, they get their jobs. Here are all of them. We're going to do a superhero cabinet project after the AP because you guys still have stuff to do. But these are all the 15 cabinet level positions. They all control their own budgets. Now, that doesn't mean the legislative branch can't oversee them. They can because they control the money. But once they get the money, it's theirs unless it's specifically set for a certain sum or task. Think back to Nixon, right? The president's got to spend the money the way that the Congress tells him to if it was allocated that way. Otherwise, if it's a set amount of money to this Department of State, then they can spend it however they want to. Remember, if they don't spend the money the way they're told, exactly, that's impoundment. Now, first 4 department positions. Department of State, that's first. Defense is second. Treasury's third. Department of Justice is fourth. Dinner conversation, this is the only position where they're not called secretary, they're called attorney general. The way that these departments are created are the way that they succeed in the presidency. Okay, so it goes president, vice president, speaker of the House, president pro tempore of the Senate, and then Department of State, Department of Defense, Department of Treasury, Department of Justice, and then so forth and so on. These are cabinet level positions because they control their own budget and staff. So they have a lot of discretionary authority, but not the most. Second is agencies. Agencies fall under executive offices, okay? So they have much less discretionary authority because their budgets are completely controlled by the Congress. They tell them how to spend the money. Now they ask for money, all right, but they are near cabinet level status because they don't have the same discretionary authority to do what they want. The further away you get from the president, remember, the more discretionary authority that you have. So over here, we're going to come to them in a minute. Absolute has the most, cabinet second, executive office third, White House staff 0 discretionary authority. NASA is an example of this. CIA is an example. EPA Director Andrew Wheeler is an example of an administrator, the Environmental Protection Agency. He can be fired by the president. He has much less power than a cabinet level position, still has power, but not the same discretionary authority because he doesn't control his budget. Now, commissions have the most discretionary authority. All right, that's because a couple different reasons. Number one, there's not a single head. In departments, single head. In agency, single head. In commissions, multiple heads. And they have to be members of different parties. Even numbers on commissions, okay? So there's always an even number of Democrats and Republicans because they serve for set amounts of time. And they regulate parts of industry for the most part. They don't want the president to have that ability. Some independent agencies. The first one was the Federal Trade Commission that was created in 1887 when it was actually the ICC, the Interstate Commerce Commission. We're going to come back to that in a minute. Securities and Exchange controls the stock market. Federal Communications controls radio and TV. Federal elections control elections, right? Now, if they have the set amount of time and if they can regulate the economy and they can't be fired, then how is there any control over them? Congress can still exhibit oversight. In other words, Congress can make sure that the money that's being spent is spent in the proper way. What they mean by that is they can haul these commissioners in front of their subcommittees and say, what did you do with my money? Remember, power of the purse. So how are they controlled? The president can make recommendations, number one, and Congress can make them come in and talk about what they're doing. Are they meeting their needs? Are they regulating the economy? And finally, how are they spending their money? All right. Some examples of this we're going to get to in a second, but the major case is this case called Munn v. Illinois. The question put before the Supreme Court in Munn v. Illinois was, did the state-imposed rates deny the warehouse elevators equal opportunity protection for due process under the 14th Amendment? Let's talk about this case. First of all, facts of the case. Illinois tried to regulate grain warehouses, the Grange, and their elevator rates by establishing maximum rates for their use. So basically what Illinois said is, look, we want to make sure that the farmers aren't getting screwed. We're going to set a maximum amount that these Grange elevators can charge when the farmers store their grain there. These Grange elevators sued. They said, did the state-imposed rates deny the warehouse and their elevator owners equal protection and due process under the 14th Amendment? Why 14th Amendment? It's because Illinois is getting sued, okay? The 14th Amendment protects us from the states, so they had to decide whether or not states had this power under the 14th Amendment. And the court said no, that they weren't being denied either equal protection or due process. Justice Waite for the court, he wrote the majority opinion, took a broad view of the state's police powers. Remember, reserve powers, police powers, same thing. He argued that states may regulate the use of private property. That's interesting. States can regulate private property when such regulation becomes necessary for the public good. I underline that word necessary for a reason, because this is where federal commissions come into account, okay? So because federal commissions are necessary and are regulating industry for the public good, the court's going to rule them legal. So even though this is a state case, federal regulatory agencies are legal under this case because the national government is regulating private property for the public good, and that's necessary. Boom! Congress creates these commissions in order to regulate private industry for the proper good because of this case. So, 1876 is Munn v. Illinois. The Grange movement comes about in the ICC comes about in 1887. All right, so you can read all this if you want to. This is about a little bit of the background in the Grange movement and how Munn v. Illinois came about. Let's talk about some regulatory agencies. The Federal Reserve Board regulates our economy. They regulate the money supply. They do it through bonds. They do it through interest rates. They do it through treasury bills. Securities and Exchange Commission regulates the stock market. Look, economy. Federal Trade Commission, economy. The one that you can learn about that's really fun is Pacifica Corp versus the FCC. In the 1970s, the Pacifica Corp had a radio station. This radio station played George Carlin's 7 Dirty Words bit. In it, he discusses all the dirty words in the English language, well, most of them, and he narrows it down to 7 dirty words. They played this on the radio. This commission said you can't play words on the radio like that. This independent regulatory agency, the Federal Communications Commission, you can't play dirty words on the radio. This is why you can't swear on the radio. The radio crosses state lines and it's part of industry. The national government can regulate it. If you're interested, and I would like you to, please read at the Pacifica Corp versus the FCC page. I downloaded that or uploaded that for you guys. Read that, answer the questions. This is a great example of what a regulatory commission can do because it regulates the economy. Think about the power the president would have if he could regulate communications on radio stations and TV stations. He could censor stations he doesn't like. That's why they're independent. Finally, a quick review of Bureaucracy. It's a AP review. It's about 12 or 13 minutes long. He's a little dull. You can't see him. He doesn't wear hats. You guys just saw this. Independent regulatory agencies, quick review, are federal agencies created by an act of Congress, necessary and proper clause, that are independent of the executive departments. They serve set terms and can't be fired. These agencies are meant to impose and enforce regulations free of political influence, regulations on the economy. The president is the political influence part. He can't fire them if they're not doing what he wants. Okay, so that is it for the Bureaucracy. You guys had your readings. You guys had day 1. You guys had day 2. And I will jump ahead and I will post now the review stuff for the Bureaucracy starting tomorrow so you guys can see what they expect you to know for the AP. I will see you guys on Friday. We are going to jump ahead a little bit. So we're going to jump up to the Bureaucracy part, not to the Constitution part. And then we'll jump back to the Constitution part starting next week. And we'll start Judiciary on Friday. Okay? So I hope you guys are having a good day. It was great to see all you guys. Abigail, take care of that cat. Hopefully it's okay after you threw it. And I will see you guys soon. As always, Shill Dog out.